I never thought a simple email would destroy everything I worked for. 1 second, I was sipping lukewarm coffee and prepping for our Monday morning team meeting. The next, I was staring at the subject line of an email that would flip my entire career upside down. Congratulations, Claire. Claire. Not me. I blinked twice, sure I was hallucinating. I had led the team for over a year, clocked in endless overtime, saved a six-figure contract from falling through, and even mentored Claire when she first joined. Everyone, even our boss, had dropped hints that the senior project manager position was mine. It was supposed to be a formality. An announcement. A pat on the back after years of loyalty. But instead, Claire, who'd been here a little over a year, got the job. And no one even looked surprised. Before I go further, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. This is just the beginning of the story, and trust me, it gets a lot darker than you think. As I sat in that stale, gray conference room, surrounded by clapping hands and forced smiles, something inside me cracked. I wasn't just passed over. I was betrayed. And soon, I'd find out just how deep the betrayal went, and who had been quietly pulling the strings behind my back. It wasn't just a promotion I lost. It was everything. The applause felt like knives. Fake smiles. Hollow congratulations. Even my manager, Greg, gave Claire a shoulder squeeze like she just won an Oscar. I sat there, frozen, hoping, praying, that someone would make eye contact and silently say, "This isn't right." But they all just kept clapping. Like this was normal. After the meeting, I went straight to my office, shut the door, and stared at my screen. My inbox was already filled with "Congrats, Claire" threads, and not one person had messaged me. Not even to say, "Hey, man. You okay?" I wasn't okay. I felt humiliated. Worse than that, I felt invisible. I opened the company org chart, something I hadn't looked at in months, and there it was, Claire's name right above mine. A title that should have been mine. A position I had been unofficially doing for months without the pay or recognition. Then something strange caught my eye. Her promotion had already been submitted to HR a week ago. A week. That meant this entire time, while I was preparing my final presentation, attending meetings, mentoring interns, even covering for Claire while she took sick leave, everyone already knew. Everyone had been smiling to my face while the knife was twisting in my back. The final insult? The file Claire used to present her new vision for the team was my deck. She had just rebranded it and slapped her name on top. And that's when I realized, this wasn't just office politics. It was war. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying every interaction over the past month, looking for clues I had missed, strange glances, awkward silences, sudden shifts in tone. And slowly, a pattern began to form. This wasn't a last-minute decision. It had been planned. The next morning, I came in early. Earlier than anyone else. I sat at my desk in silence, just staring out over the rows of cubicles. This place used to feel like home. Now it felt like a setup. Claire arrived later than usual, carrying a celebratory coffee tray and flashing that PR-trained smile. People gathered around her desk like moths to a flame, coworkers who had ignored her before suddenly treating her like royalty. I noticed something else too. The whispers. Every time I walked by a group, they quieted down. Eyes dropped to keyboards. A few people even stopped talking mid-sentence when I entered the break room. So I did what I had to do. I went to IT. I had built a decent rapport with Kevin, the guy who ran our back-end systems. We'd bonded over fantasy football and a shared hatred of microwave fish. I caught him near the vending machines and said quietly, "I need to know who accessed my shared drive last week. Especially my deck." He hesitated. "I just want the truth," I added. "Nothing more." Kevin didn't say a word. He just nodded and walked off. 2 hours later, he slipped me a printed access log in a plain white envelope. And when I opened it, my hands went cold. Claire's name wasn't the only one on the list. There was another. Someone I trusted even more. There it was. Plain as day. Greg Harper, my manager. The man who once told me, "You've got leadership written all over you." The same guy who promised to go to bat for my promotion. The same man who took me out for drinks after I closed the Sterling account and toasted my future. He had accessed my files. 3 times. The same week Claire borrowed my deck. I sat at my desk gripping the paper so tightly it crinkled in my hand. I felt like a fool. No, worse. I felt used. Greg hadn't just lied. He'd sold me out. But why? What did he gain by handing my work to Claire? I decided to confront him. I waited until just before lunch, when he usually took his walk outside. I caught him by the elevators. "Got a minute?" I asked. He smiled, that same fake, polished smile he'd probably been rehearsing in the mirror. "Of course, what's up?" We stepped into the hallway near the back exit, out of earshot. I pulled the printout from my folder and handed it to him. His smile faltered. His eyes scanned the page. Slowly. "You accessed my deck," I said quietly. "You knew I was preparing it for the final pitch. You handed it to Claire." He folded the paper neatly and sighed like he was annoyed with me. "I did what was best for the team," he said. "Claire brings a fresh perspective." "And I don't?" My voice cracked. "After 4 years of grinding for this company?" Greg's face hardened. "Look. Sometimes, loyalty isn't enough. Leadership means knowing when to pivot. Claire's got support from upstairs. It wasn't personal." "Not personal." He walked away, leaving me stunned. That's when it finally hit me. I hadn't just lost a promotion. I'd been played by the very people who were supposed to have my back. I didn't go back to my desk right away. I stood in that stairwell for a solid 10 minutes, fists clenched, fighting the urge to scream. My entire career, 4 years of 60-hour weeks, skipped vacations, weekends lost to last-minute deadlines, tossed aside like garbage. For what? A fresh perspective? No. It wasn't about perspective. It was about control. Greg wanted someone he could shape. Claire was new. Eager. Less experienced. She wouldn't challenge him. I, on the other hand, had started speaking up. Making suggestions. Taking initiative. And now I was being punished for it. I went home early that day. My hands were trembling the entire drive. I couldn't even tell my wife. I just walked in, hugged my son tighter than usual, and tried to act like I hadn't just watched years of my life get flushed down the drain. But the worst part? The silence. Not one person from work reached out. Not a single message. No "Hey, you okay?" No, that was unexpected. It was like I had been erased, like I never existed in that space at all. Even people I mentored, people I covered shifts for, people I defended in meetings, they just moved on. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, cycling between rage and heartbreak. But I wasn't done. If they wanted a quiet exit, they picked the wrong guy. I had evidence now, not just of betrayal, but of misconduct. HR might not care about bruised egos, but they do care about stolen work, policy violations, and insider decisions. They wanted to bury me quietly. But I was about to make a lot of noise. The next morning, I walked into the office with one thing on my mind: evidence. I wasn't going to scream or flip a desk. That's what they expected. No, I'd hit them where it hurts, legally. I still had the access logs from Kevin, but I needed more. Emails. File timestamps. Any traceable breadcrumbs that proved my intellectual property had been used without credit or consent. I spent my entire morning gathering receipts. I downloaded old presentation versions from the company drive. I checked email threads. I saved timestamped Slack messages showing Claire asking vague questions about my deck, right before it magically reappeared in her hands. Every click, every screenshot, I documented. By noon, I had a clean, airtight folder of proof. I even labeled it, Misappropriation and Ethical Concerns, Confidential. Then I requested a private meeting with HR. I'll be honest, I was sweating bullets. Going to HR felt like lighting a match in a gas-filled room. But I didn't care anymore. I was done being polite while people stepped on me. If I was going down, I wasn't going alone. The HR rep, Melissa, listened carefully. She didn't interrupt. She didn't smirk. She just took notes and nodded as I laid everything out: dates, names, documents. I told her what Greg did. How Claire got access. How my work had been rebranded, repackaged, and used to elevate someone else. When I finally finished, she leaned forward and said, "This is serious." She promised to escalate it immediately and thanked me for bringing it forward. But as I left the room, I caught something in her eyes. It wasn't just concern. It was fear. And that's when I realized something I hadn't considered before. This wasn't just about me. There was more going on in this company than I had ever imagined. Melissa's reaction haunted me. I kept replaying her expression in my head, that tight smile, the subtle shift in her tone. The way she lowered her voice before I left the room. She wasn't just rattled. She was worried. And not just for me. Something told me this wasn't the first time she'd heard a story like mine. That evening, I stayed late under the guise of catching up on project cleanup. Most people had already cleared out, and Claire, in her new role, had left for some leadership dinner. I wandered past the HR hallway and paused outside Melissa's office. Her door was cracked open. She was still inside. On a call. Whispering. "If this gets out, we'll have more than just legal exposure. He has documentation. I've seen it." A pause. "No, Greg's name is all over it. We can't protect him again." Again. That one word stopped me cold. I backed away quickly before I was seen, heart pounding. My instincts were right. This went deeper than just one stolen presentation or one failed promotion. Greg had done this before, and someone had protected him. The next day, I did something reckless. I approached another ex-employee I knew had left the company abruptly the year before, Sarah. She'd once been a rising star, praised by everyone, and then suddenly re-signed with zero notice. No goodbye post. No LinkedIn update. Just gone. I messaged her through LinkedIn. "Hey Sarah, I think we have something in common. Mind talking?" She replied within minutes. "Sure. I've been waiting for someone to say that." We scheduled a call. And what she told me. It made everything I'd experienced look like child's play. Sarah's voice was low and measured when we spoke on the phone. I could tell she'd been through hell, but she wasn't ready to stay silent any longer. "I left because I was fed up with the lies, the backstabbing, and the favoritism," she said. "Greg did this to me too. Used my work, took credit, and then made my life miserable until I couldn't take it anymore." I swallowed hard. It wasn't just my battle. She told me about how Greg had systematically crushed anyone who threatened his power, promoting Claire as his new puppet. And how HR was complicit, turning a blind eye, covering up incidents, and silencing complaints. Sarah warned me to be careful. "They don't play fair. You'll be targeted. But you're not alone anymore." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of hope. Together, we started piecing together a list of people who had been hurt by the same toxic system. But as the list grew, so did the stakes. Because in a company this rotten, the higher you climb, the darker the secrets you uncover. And soon, those secrets were coming for me. I thought the hardest part was over once I had Sarah's support and the evidence in my hands. I was wrong. Within days, subtle signs started popping up, emails deleted before I could read them, files mysteriously vanishing from my desktop, and once, a dark sedan parked outside my apartment for hours. One morning, I found a note slipped under my car windshield wiper. No signature. Just 3 chilling words. "Stop digging now." I didn't know whether to laugh or be terrified. At work, Claire's behavior shifted too. Gone was the fake sweetness. She started cutting me off in meetings, dismissing my ideas outright, and once even snapping, "You lost. Get over it." Greg avoided me altogether, his smirk replaced by cold indifference. But I refused to back down. If anything, the threats fueled my determination. I began documenting everything, every suspicious email, every encounter, every cold shoulder. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about a promotion anymore. This was a power struggle. A battle for control. And if I wasn't careful, I'd lose more than just a job. The office felt colder than ever. I was no longer part of any team emails or chats. Invitations to meetings stopped coming. People who used to say hi in the hallways now crossed to the other side. It was like I was a ghost. I started doubting myself. Maybe Greg was right, maybe I wasn't cut out for leadership. Maybe I was just making a mess of things. But then I'd look at my evidence folder and remember all the times I went the extra mile, stayed late, and fought for the team. Still, the isolation wore me down. My wife noticed the change. She asked if I wanted to see a therapist. I said no. I didn't want to be the guy who couldn't handle pressure. At work, the tension mounted. One day, Claire cornered me by the coffee machine. Her voice was low but venomous. "Everyone knows you're a threat. You should quit before it gets worse." I stared at her, burning with anger, but said nothing. I knew this wasn't just personal. It was a warning. The hardest part? Feeling completely alone in the middle of a crowd. But quitting wasn't an option. Just when I thought I was completely isolated, something unexpected happened. Jake, One of the quietest guys on our team pulled me aside after a meeting. "I've been watching all this unfold," he said, eyes darting nervously. "And I want to help." Jake wasn't the office loudmouth or a social butterfly. He was the kind of guy who kept his head down, worked hard, and avoided drama. "So why now?" He explained that he had his own reasons. Years ago, Greg had blocked his promotion too, and Jake had been marginalized ever since. He'd been quietly gathering his own evidence of Greg's toxic behavior and the HR cover-ups. Suddenly, I wasn't alone anymore. With Jake's help, I gained access to internal emails, calendar invites, even recordings from a few meetings that had been lost. We began building a case, piece by piece, proof not just of stolen work, but of manipulation, intimidation, and outright lies. It was risky. Every move felt like walking a tightrope. But with each new document we uncovered, my confidence grew. For the first time in months, I felt the tide turning. We weren't just fighting for me anymore. We were fighting for every person Greg had ever stepped on. Jake and I knew the clock was ticking. We couldn't just hand over our evidence and hope for a miracle. Greg had allies, and the higher-ups weren't exactly eager to rock the boat. This meant we had to be smart, strategic. We spent nights crafting a detailed report, documenting everything: dates, names, emails, messages, and audio clips. We even cross-referenced company policies to highlight clear violations. Our goal wasn't just to prove wrongdoing but to make it impossible to ignore. The more we dug, the uglier the story got. There were cover-ups, hush money, and whispered threats we hadn't even imagined. But even as we prepared, the pressure mounted. I started receiving more veiled threats. My work was constantly scrutinized, my every move monitored. Despite it all, the support from Jake and Sarah kept me grounded. Then came the day we planned to present our case to Melissa in HR. Walking into her office, I felt a mix of fear and resolve. This was our moment to finally shine a light on the darkness. But as Melissa reviewed the documents, her face drained of color. "I need to consult with legal," she whispered. And that's when the real battle began. Melissa's words hung heavy in the air. "I need to consult with legal." At first, I thought this was a good sign. A serious investigation was finally underway. But the days that followed told a different story. Legal was slow, painfully slow. Weeks went by with no updates. I started hearing whispers that the company's lawyers were pressuring Melissa to tone it down, to handle things internally, to avoid scandal. One afternoon, I overheard Greg talking with another executive in the hallway. His smug smile told me everything I needed to know. They were buying time, waiting for the heat to die down. Then came the ultimatum. Melissa called me into her office and laid it out flat. "Either you agree to a quiet settlement, leave the company with a severance package and no public complaint, or we escalate this, and things get messy." I felt like the walls were closing in. The people who were supposed to protect me were now asking me to back down. But walking away meant letting them win. And that was a price I wasn't willing to pay. The weight of Melissa's ultimatum hit me like a freight train. Quiet settlement. Walk away. Take the money and disappear. It was tempting. Exhaustion was eating me alive. The endless stress, the isolation, the constant fear, all made me wonder if maybe giving up was the safer path. But as I sat alone that night, staring at the offer letter on my kitchen table, something inside snapped. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every person silenced by the same corrupt system. About exposing the truth, no matter the cost. So I declined. I told Melissa I would take this public, through legal channels, the press, whatever it took. The backlash was immediate. The next morning, my access to key systems was revoked. My emails were redirected. I was excluded from all meetings. HR stopped returning my calls. But I also received messages, from former employees, from people still stuck in the system, thanking me for standing up. Their support became a lifeline. I didn't know how this would end. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was fighting for something bigger than a promotion. I was fighting for justice. Months have passed since I refused the settlement. The battle wasn't easy. I faced retaliation, endless meetings with lawyers, and nights filled with doubt. But slowly, things began to change. The company launched a formal investigation. Greg was placed on leave. Claire was quietly transferred to another department. HR underwent a leadership shakeup. Some of the voices that were once silenced finally started to be heard. Most importantly, I found my own voice again. I learned that standing up isn't about winning a title or a paycheck. It's about refusing to accept betrayal, toxicity, and injustice, no matter how high the cost. If you've ever felt invisible, betrayed, or pushed out at work, know you're not alone. And sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the biggest changes. Thanks for listening to my story. If you want to hear more real-life workplace dramas told raw and unfiltered, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. There are more stories just like this coming, and you won't want to miss them. Remember, your voice matters.